Good morning. Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is Will with Perpetual Assets. I have a gentleman on the line. Really happy to have you back with us, Mr. Jim Willie. Needs no introduction. The Golden Jackass himself, the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. Jim, welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing very strange. Thank you very much.
As usual, I presume.
Yeah. Well, I'm a strange guy to begin with, but the strange events that are accelerating are making me doubly weird because I'm getting a little wired in addition to having my usual personality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've been watching the events too, Will. There's a quickening going on.
Yeah, hence the overall idea for our theme today, acceleration of events. And I know you wrote an article to that effect here last week. I am consistently blown away with every passing day, week, month at the acceleration of events. I mean, 9 months ago, our interview, we were talking about different things that have come to light today, namely Germany turning teams, etc. Talking about some of the things with Russia as well. But the acceleration here in the last, what your article highlighted, just 3 weeks, right? Just the last 3-4 weeks, the beginning of this year, has been unprecedented.
It has, in fact, before I wrote that public article, I had what I regarded to be, five very big events. And by the time I started assembling the notes and actually getting more motivated, instead of doing errands and working on the bathroom, I'm doing some remodeling. I thought, okay, I delayed a day and delayed another couple days, another couple of events. And I don't mean minor events,
right.
Major events. So the 5 events that I had pointed to in 2 weeks turned into 8 or 10 in 3 weeks because more things happened. And these are all gigantic events where maybe a year or two ago, you might look back and say, gosh, we have an event like this every 3 or 4 or 5 months, and things are really happening now. Well, now they're happening every 3 or 4 or 5 days.
Yep.
Precisely as I forecasted last October, November, and December. I said, look, as we get toward the end of January, things are going to start breaking apart, coming apart at the seams, systemic breakdown, economic collapse, all kinds of things shattering. So here are the 10 events. They're in chronological order. They're not in any kind of order of, say, importance or impact. Russia jumped off the petrodollar recycle wagon. They're not going to be holding any dollars. They're going to turn them immediately into other currency or gold. The West is putting out propaganda saying that Russia is spending all their gold to keep their ruble stable. It's just the other way around. They're taking all their trade income, getting rid of the dollars, and adding to their gold. We're just liars with a capital L, capital I, etc.
This is the famous Putin chess strategy, is it not?
Yes. I mean, if we're going to sanction their country and make it difficult for them to, have business partners in the West or conduct transactions with banks in the West, well, they're going to just say, well, we don't want your dollar. We're not going to settle our energy trade in dollar. And that's essentially what's happening. They're taking their energy dollars and getting rid of them right away. It's like, there's not enough time to sit in their pocket. It never sits in their pocket. It just gets traded immediately into euros and rubles and Chinese RMB. Mm-hmm. But they're also putting it into gold, exactly the opposite of what our news says.
Yeah.
The second event is huge. The Swiss announced the end of their 120 euro peg for their Swiss franc currency. And this is a story that we could actually talk for half an hour about. We might revisit this later on in the interview, but it basically means the Swiss got tired of maintaining an artificial value for their a lower artificial value for their native franc currency, because all kinds of money was flowing in from across Europe and elsewhere. Like Russia, the Russian oligarchs were piling into Switzerland. Not just Europeans, not just Germans and French and Italians and Spaniards. There's no Greek money. That's why I didn't mention them. But there's a whole lot more to this story. The Swiss didn't want to see their currency up at 140 and 160 per euro. So they pegged it at 120. And the only way to do that is to collect euros and not convert them. So a year and a half ago, they had about 400 billion or 370 billion euros in their Swiss National Bank, their central bank. All right, well, now it's about 800 billion euros. So anyone who thinks that the action 2 weeks ago is done, you're clueless.
They have to unwind all that position?
That is stage one.
Wow.
The big question in my mind that I've been asking, and it's very hard to get an answer, how many stages are there? I'm thinking there are at least 3 and maybe as many as 5 or 6.
Well, one of my questions regarding this for you, Jim, is the big, ugly other IRS interest rate swaps and the derivatives. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the largest derivative in the derivative space? Interest rate swaps maintain the largest positions. And this was undoubtedly, this move was a surprise, was it not? This was a surprise to the Western central banking facade. What have we triggered a derivative crisis meltdown? Have we lit a fuse for a derivative time bomb?
Yeah, but relative to oil, not relative to gold. The Swiss were basically doing something very clever and hidden. They were shorting gold, and they were long the dollar with U.S. Treasuries. So now they're selling their dollars, and they're buying gold and triggering a global rebound, recovery reversal in gold. The big questions I asked were, who kicked them into their action? And I'm hearing, and it's piecing together. We're getting a little astray of the main 10 events, but I hope we can continue with the rest of the events in a few minutes here.
Sure.
The 2 parties that I think kicked the Swiss were first Germany, because in order to maintain their short gold, long dollar position, and by the way, when they started this peg, gold was at 1850 or 1900. They took down gold all the way to 1200, the Swiss. So now remove the peg and you might go right back to 1900 and continue. So the leasing agent for the Swiss to help them continue selling gold beyond what they had were the Germans. They were leasing some German gold. Now, I can't say I looked it up and by gum I verified it. This is what it seems like. The Germans wanted to kick the U.S. in the testicalia. So they did it by kicking the Swiss.
Interesting. Okay. Let them take the fall, right?
Well, let them take the heat.
The heat, rather, yeah.
The second party, according to my understanding, were the Chinese. And the verification was item number 8 in the major events. The Swiss set up a major Chinese RMB trading center in Zurich. Can you say on condition that they get rid of the euro peg?
Yep.
Okay, so the Chinese and the Germans are working together.
Yep.
All right. Now the third major event, if I could move along here, please. The Greeks. They had an election, the Syriza party of, I don't even know how to describe them. How about instead of using liberal or conservative or fascist or radical, how about if we just say the anti-EU party? So, because they were looking to get out of the EU and to default on debt and say F you to it all.
Mm-hmm. Separatists.
Separatists, right. The separatist party, the anti-EU party.
Yeah.
All right, now, we're going to be hearing more about this for the next several months, not several days, because they're going to create the model for getting out of the EU.
With help from some big neighbors, right?
Yeah, gosh, the Greeks were given a real tempting carrot by Putin and Russia that if they get out of the EU, the Russians will lift the food ban.
Mm-hmm.
And Greece is a major agricultural center. Mm-hmm. In fact, you take a look at some of the other southern European nations, and they've got developed industry, like Italy and Spain and France. You look at Greece, and they do not. They have port facilities, and they have agriculture. Mm-hmm. And they've got their own... They've got their own grapes. I'm sorry. They got their own olives. I'm sorry. I messed up my own joke. The Greek olives are not Italian olives. They're not the same. Okay, so the Greeks are going to create this model, and all eyes in Spain and Italy are watching. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be interesting because the BRICS are now getting involved, making some overtures that maybe they will offer some kind of debt relief to Greece on condition that they default. I mean, it's getting really dicey.
Wow.
If Greece defaults on some EU debt, by that I mean government debt and bank debt, there are two types of debt that Greeks have. One is to governments in the EU, and the other is to big banks in those same EU countries. Mm-hmm. Think of it as they owe some big German banks some money, but they also owe the German government some money. So it's a matter of who underwrote the loans. Mm-hmm. All right. So the Greeks owe a lot of money, and the Chinese said, you default and get a rework, renegotiate, restructure of your debt. And the BRICS will come in on some white horses, and we will help you out. And, restructure the whole damn thing. Mm-hmm. Spain and Italy and Portugal are possibly going to do the same thing. All right, fine. It's not over. Not over at all. And the Greeks are getting this other little lure of the Gazprom pipeline going through Turkey, then through Greece, and then supplying the rest of Western Europe. So Greeks are looking at some pretty heavy profits from the transit fees. Okay, these are all events, Will, that have happened in the last 3 weeks. The Euro Central Bank announced details of their QE program. I call it their tampering. They've done some things that are clever, like it's not going to be, this is a very important point. In the United States, the Fed has been doing unsterilized QE bond monetization purchases, which means they print money, they buy bonds, they do not drain any money elsewhere. It's new injections of a net positive into the system. Mm-hmm. The Draghi Euro Central Bank is looking to do something different. They're looking to back, I don't have this all figured out, very complicated stuff, but they're looking to essentially drain the system or back existing debt, underwrite existing debt, and somehow, cleverly, not injecting new money into the euro banking system, but back up sovereign bonds and not provide the money for them, just to provide the backup for them. I don't understand. I think they're lying. I think what they're going to do is print the money and back it up and provide the money and buy the bonds, and later we're going to learn that it was not unsterilized.
Right. They're just positioning to create some false confidence, huh?
Right. I got it backward. They're going to be found to be liars where it was not sterilized.
Right. It was unsterilized the whole time. Yeah.
No, I think I get. Yeah. Okay. I get the two. Sterilized means make sure that you don't have the bad effect.
Right.
That means removing money. So they're going to be found out not to be sterilized. They're going to be found to be doing the same thing the Fed's doing all along.
Right. Right.
All right. Then King Abdullah died. I mean, I have a joke that when he died, so did the petrodollar.
Yeah, this is interesting timing. I mean, with what we've seen oil do in the last. When did the descent of oil start? The price was it?
I think it was around October or so.
Okay. Yeah, interesting timing on this death, and then his replacement as well, right?
Well, the details are what's interesting. This Prince Salman was designated as the crown prince several months ago. Mm-hmm. What they do is they have a lot of princes. And, I'm not going to get the exact figures, but King Abdullah had a lot of half-brothers. And his father, who was the original king for Saudi Arabia, had, I think, 23 or 26 wives. Now, you pull out the family tree, and it gets a little messy.
Yeah.
And you don't have enough space in the, how should I say, horizontal dimension.
Right.
I produced in the January hat-trick letter a partial family tree that showed about 8 of his brothers of Abdullah's brothers. Uh-huh. And they're all competitors to be crown prince. They're all half-brothers, except for a couple who are actually blood brothers. But then on to the side, it said that there were 13 other wives with dozens of other half-brothers. I mean, it's a joke.
Yeah.
So when you have a competition for the throne, it's not a matter of 4 or 5 different boys and girls, men and women. It's a matter of half your whole country. That's how you get civil war, people.
Yep.
Too many princes vying to be crown prince. All right, here's a detail on Prince Salman that's not so sweet. He has senile dementia.
Ouch.
So, pardon me if I can't keep attention. What were you talking about?
I told you I was going to do what?
Okay, so King Salman now, it doesn't really roll off the tongue. King Salman. King Abdullah, yeah. King Fahd, yeah. King Salman, no, not yet. So King Salman's going to meet the heads of state. He'll meet, say, an economics minister from China, and I'm sure 10 minutes into the meeting, they'll have to remind the guy who you're sitting next to.
Yeah.
And they'll have to point on the sheet of paper the agenda because he lost his place. Okay, this is not funny. But you cannot maintain the Saudi Arabian kingdom with the king who's got senile dementia, and he's not in great health anyway.
Well,
then you had Merkel offering at the Davos meeting. Well, this actually shocked me, but at the same time caused some uncontrollable laughter. Merkel offered a proposal to Russia. If they just promise peace and a firm ceasefire, like honoring the Minsk agreement that the United States wants no party to, then Merkel will work toward establishing a trade union with Russia and other Asian nations. Isn't that exactly the Eurasian trade zone? Wow, hey, Merkel, you woke up to the reality of a Eurasian trade zone. Now, implicit to the Merkel statement, this is item number 6, event number 6, implicit is the rejection of the U.S.-led trade pact called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Mm-hmm. We got the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership in Asia, that no one wants. Now we get the TTIP in Europe that no one wants. These are the Obama pearls that are being cast to his feet. So the Davos meeting, the voice had a great phrase. He said, someone asked him in my gang, my staff, my virtual staff, what do you think might come out of the Davos Economic Forum? And he said, doesn't matter. All the wrong people are there. Mm-hmm. So were any Chinese finance ministers, central bank heads, sovereign wealth managers, planners for the Eurasian trade zone there? No. So who gives a hoot?
Right.
Who cares?
It's just a Western cocktail party.
It's a Western banker cocktail party. And my other joke, I have a lot of little quips. What a perfect place for Interpol to go in and arrest them all. Except they're all protected in Switzerland.
Ah, interesting.
Not the European Union. That is not European Union, subject to EU laws. So they're in danger. The American leaders are in danger of being arrested. And believe me, there have been airplanes, flights with U.S. cabinet ministers and Bush family members. And they're told, you land in Ireland, you land in I don't want to make up a country because I might be wrong. You land in other country X in Europe, in addition to Ireland, and you're going to be arrested immediately.
Well, you know, it couldn't happen to a finer bunch.
Well, their time is done. And you know, they offered this Ukraine war only because they wanted to break the global currency reset, which is not properly reported in the U.S. press. It was well, they hardly ever covered it all, but they gave it the wrong name. It's not a currency reset. It's a return to the gold standard.
Right.
It's not so much to jiggle around the euro and pound and franc and the yen and the dollar. It's to make sure they're all worth half as much relative to gold. Mm-hmm. What I just said was, it's to make sure that gold price doubles in all their terms. Mm-hmm. That's called a return to the gold standard, not a currency reset. But remember, gold is the ultimate currency, and silver is its sidekick currency. Mm-hmm. All right, then you had another major event, item number 7, the German watchdog. They're more than that. They're the BaFin, B-A-F-I-N. They're kind of like 3 organizations rolled into one: the Securities and Exchange Commission for stocks, regulating stocks and watchdogging them; the Commodity Futures Trading Commission for all the futures, watchdog and cop; and the Federal Department of Insurance Corporation, FDIC, whatever the FDIC is, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Not really, because the FDIC has their watchdogs, but BaFin is not an underwriter to insure bank accounts. It's more like they fulfill some of the cop police role that the FDIC does. And they have some functions regarding, you know, debt ratings and making sure that I don't have it all figured out, but it's a very different organization, agency in Germany with BaFin. Anyway, the point is that BaFin just made a conclusion that they saw no manipulation in the gold market. This is a setback. So it's an event, and unlike the other events, which are all positive for gold, the watchdog BaFin decision of we see no evil, we hear no evil, we hear no evil, I see no, I hear no, I speak no, this is going to be a setback, and I think what's going to happen, I'm just going out on the limb a little bit here. In a matter of a few weeks, Germany is going to make a pendulum action on the other side. Very powerful, because this BaFin decision has angered a lot of powerful people, including industrial leaders. I'm talking about corporation and conglomerate CEOs and board members, big, important executive types in their corporate sector.
So we're seeing some division there in those upper German echelons that you've spoken of in the past.
Yes, they're dividing now. The camps are dividing very clearly. On the one side, you have industry and commerce and the corporations who engage in trade, do things.
And then good old toxic stuff on the other side.
And the banking and politicians and the ones who don't do anything but who make all the rules and control all the counterfeit.
And pollute.
And bond fraud.
Right.
And, print money for themselves. They're on the other side, and the gulf is growing. And I think Germany is going to be, oh gosh, I have a funny way of, it's not a joke, it's just a summary way. Greece and Turkey are going to be easy to flip east. Mm-hmm. Japan and Germany are going to be tough, with a resistance to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Fierce resistance. Okay, item number 8, big event. This is very much related, I think, and the fact that it was just a week and a half later.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. The fact that when you first released this, I thought that these events were more spaced apart, and especially the Swiss RMB. I'm sorry, the Swiss DPEG, and then this RMB trading center that's set up in Zurich. But you're telling me this is a week later?
About a week and a half.
Yeah.
Later, or maybe a little more than that. But these events are all within 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to see an interesting battle. We already have Frankfurt, Germany, positioned in conflict competition with London for the RMB trading hub. Mm-hmm. And remember, a trading hub in RMB, it's the Chinese currency, does 2 things. The first thing is the simple stuff. Just let's convert currency. In Frankfurt, they might assist in converting euros to RMB, mm-hmm. And other currencies into RMB. It's a trading hub. It's going to be useful for a number of different purposes. There might be some Middle Eastern currencies that find their way. The Turkish lira might trade in Germany at the Frankfurt RMB hub to exchange for Chinese currency. And once Greece gets off, they're going to have their drachma trade in Frankfurt. These countries are not going to go to London. That's where the competition is going to be. Now, the second function, in addition to currency exchange for a trading hub, is bond issuance. This is very big. We're talking about, perhaps some sovereign government bond issuance in Chinese currency. Like suppose, let's just move into the future, Greece or Italy, months and months down the road, decide they want to finance half of this year's deficit in Chinese currency. Mm-hmm. Why would they do that? Well, first, because they see that there's a big liquidity that can chase and provide demand for it, but also they want it to be on a stable currency. The Italians are not going to want, after they get off the euro, they're not going to want to price their debt in lira, for the simple reason that if the lira falls versus the more stable Chinese currency, their debt would rise. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see a debt explosion as soon as they get out of the euro. So there are going to be a lot of countries that will try to tie down some of their sovereign debt with Chinese currency denomination. And in addition to that, countries like, say, companies like McDonald's already float corporate bonds in Chinese RMB. There are going to be gaggles of companies that do the same. So this RMB competition between London and Frankfurt is going to heat up. Mm-hmm. We just now have a third member in the competition. So can you say non-dollar trade settlement?
Absolutely. I mean, the sheer just obvious chain of events here with this DPEG and then the setup of this trading center for RMB. This is maybe you don't want to go this off topic here, but what do you think about an RMB dollar DPEG in the future?
Well, I think 2 are coming real soon. Mm-hmm. As soon as the Swiss euro peg got removed, I started thinking, what's next? And a couple guys on my team were thinking, something's next. And Euro Raj said the same thing that I did. Well, look for the Hong Kong dollar.
Yeah.
It's right now at a 7.7 something. I don't know exactly what it was or is, but it's around there. And curiously, somewhere around 7 is the Chinese yuan. Mm-hmm. So each one is pegged, and each one, therefore, is causing them a problem.
Sure.
Because look at all the damage coming to the U.S. economy, despite what that nitwit, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew, said. A strong dollar is not good for the U.S. economy. He's got it dead wrong, and I wonder what crackerjack box he got his economics degree in. First of all, it means all the U.S. stocks are more expensive to foreign investors. All the U.S. property, commercial and residential, is all more expensive to foreign investors, and and U.S. output from industry, like all the cars we make, they're not going to be cheap to foreign buyers. The price just went up. So we have just locked out our economy. And then the Manchurian candidate with the 2 Social Security numbers in the White House, he says that he wants a bigger budget because we've got a stronger economy. Well, he forgot to read the press briefing because he was playing golf.
Oh my goodness! It's so up is down, left is right. I mean, you look at the mainstream, and it's hilarious. I mean, it's just laughably propaganda. It's unbelievable. I mean, pinch me, right? Anyway.
Yeah, pinch you, right? Exactly.
Number 9, shall we? Shall we move on to number 9?
Number 9. It's getting less important as we get toward the end. Well, that's not really true because 10's a Lulu. Gazprom just announced details of going through Turkey and where the locations will be on the gas pipeline. I've learned how to say that in Spanish, by the way. It's a gasoducto.
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 Like an aqueducto.
And not just where it's going to go through, but what its flow through will be, what its diameter will be, what its volume will be annually. So now the planners can prepare on the other end of Turkey, namely Greece. So they can start constructing simultaneously the Greek pipeline to supply on the bypass of Ukraine to supply Western Europe. They don't have to wait for the Turkish pipeline to be completed. They don't even have to doubt that it will be completed like they doubt for Bulgaria and Hungary. Hungary didn't get in the way. Bulgaria did, therefore Hungary got mooted out. So that's 9 for the gas pipeline. It is coming to be, and my guess, what I'm understanding is it'll take about a year to complete the Turkish pipeline. They're not calling it South Stream anymore. They're calling it Turk Stream. So they have these unique names. There's Nord Stream, N-O-R-D, that goes up to Germany. And these are very, very elaborate pipeline systems that they're not like, sewer systems or water systems. They don't have that many outlets. But they're these main outlets that get diverted to go to the neighboring country. So there are almost as many T's in the pipelines as you have countries at its sources.
Which tells me collaboration. A lot of, wow, imagine that. Countries working together in trade and providing needs and goods and services.
Well, yeah, and what I'm looking to see is how is the United States going to try to get in the way of the Turk Stream or the Greek extension?
How far is ISIS from that territory?
Well, ISIS headquarters for operations are the U.S. Embassy in Ankara, Turkey.
Wow. Well,
little known fact,
in
our embassy in Turkey is ISIS operations central headquarters.
No kidding. Wow. Well, that...
Why do you think the Turks are so upset? Why do you think they've already flipped east? They don't like what's happening.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, no shit.
Wow.
We don't need to complete this because this is a family program.
Yes, please. Number 10.
Number 10, this really didn't make the headlines because maybe the deceived and sheep out there are too busy reading that we had 3-point-something% growth in the fourth quarter for our economy in the United States, when my sources and my calculation come up with something like -2 to -4% recession. So we're just doing a better job of lying on the inflation that we use for the reduction.
Do they still even have metrics, Jim? I mean, do they even use numbers to come up to? Does the CPI still have some sort of inherent equation to it, or do they just? I mean, when do they just start picking numbers out of their what?
This is funny. The answer is funny. About 5 or 10 years ago, what they started doing, okay, let me describe the honest way. The honest way is you look at sector by sector, you look at the nominal sales and what do you call it, all goods and services. You look at the nominal activity in dollar terms, and then you take an accurate measurement of inflation, and then you reduce your nominal by the inflation. It's called a deflator, and you come up with an adjusted for inflation GDP. So what you're doing is you're doing a bottom up, component by component, and you arrive at the top from the bottom. Bottom is the components, the top is the final figure, by adding up all your components and doing your adjustment properly. Mm-hmm. Okay, what we're doing now is we do a top down. Mm-hmm. We want 2.8% growth. So how do we get there?
Right.
How do we get there? We falsify this sector with this, that sector with that. We doctor the whole damn thing with the wrong inflation. And let's make sure that we put in a nice, big, fat contribution to the defense spending.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
Because that is something like 80 or 70% of all the increase on the nominal. So if they don't properly remove inflation, they're calling the inflation growth. Mm-hmm. So here's the big miss for item 10. We had a huge failure. We were expecting something like a plus 1% for durable goods sales, and instead we had a -3%. And that was for a single month. So December, they're going to be blaming it again on the weather. I mean, gosh, it's like they blame the bad June figures for the U.S. economy. They blame it on snow.
Those winter storms that they now conveniently started naming just a couple years ago.
Some of them are probably fabricated. That's right. So, we talk about these events and the quickening. And I like to remind people that my first job out of graduate school, it used a body of theory. In graduate school and a doctoral program, there are about, I don't know exactly, 8, 7 big fields in statistics. I don't want to name them all, but for a PhD student, he's got to be pretty darn good in about 4 or 5 of them. Not all. I barely touched Fourier analysis, and the mathematically gifted among the audience will know what I mean, and they'll probably know why. It's just very difficult. It's sine and cosine waves weighted to approximate any curve, anything. You can just say, well, I got a sum of... Anyway, so there are several fields out there in statistics and probability. I got pretty good in 4 or 5, but... This, I'm sorry to say this, Will, but I got on a tangent. I forgot my main point about the main fields of statistics. I forgot why I was mentioning that.
You were talking about what was missing from the big expected durable goods orders, and then the.
Oh yes. I'm sorry. This happens once in a while. I get going on a tangent. I get all messed up.
It happens to the best of us, man.
One of the fields in statistics was called survival analysis, biometric analysis, and some case studies, for example, would be, well, we've got some competing drugs to handle diabetes, and we want to know which ones are the best, get the best reaction, and have the fewest side effects. So clinical trials, and you do your biometrics, biostatistics they also call it, but we used to call it just reliability or survival analysis. All right, well, there's a metric, if you will, that we used in quality control at my first job. It was a big computer company called Digital Equipment Corp, and I was an analyst with quality control. I had clients in the field at the manufacturing sites. We had a metric that we used. It was the time between system failures. So it might be, say, a workstation, or it might be something smaller like even a disk drive, or a monitor, or memory, a memory bank. So we would look at the time between failures, and we wanted stability there. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to see an acceleration of time between events. Because that meant that the system's messed up. The manufacturing line is not properly producing units. It means you might have bad components coming in, contaminating the whole thing.
You're looking for a healthy cycle, right?
Looking for a healthy cycle. And actually, if there's any change, you want to see a larger time between breakdown events. Now, what we're seeing here is the opposite. We're seeing a quickening. We're seeing shorter time between events. And I started this concept back in late 2012. I said, we're now seeing an increased pace in the breakdown of the system. And the reason is simple. QE. QE and its unsterilized bond monetization is killing the whole U.S. and Western economy. And they call it stimulus. Why? Because it adds liquidity to their bond purchases and redeeming their toxic bonds. So that's stimulus to them. But it raises the cost structure, causes a vanishing act to the profit margins, and companies close down business segments.
Complete looting.
It kills capital.
Complete looting of a nation, of a sovereignty.
Yeah, right. Well, what it does is it accelerates the outsourcing. You end up outsourcing to the nations that don't have the fast rising cost structure. And now it's becoming almost a universal concept. And that is one of the biggest reasons the BRICS nations are saying we must accelerate and hasten the rejection of the dollar and its replacement so that we don't have an entire destroyed global economy. So that's the quickening going on, and it brings up a really interesting point. It has a name, but I'm not really sure how important the name is. The Shemitah, the Shemitah cycle. But I just came to learn this. I mean, I'm so busy working in the weeds here sometime, and also working in looking at the whole garden that sometimes I miss the sequence of gardens over the many, many years. There's a cycle that has been going on, and it's remarkable. It's every 7 years a big financial crisis. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. 7 years ago was 2008 and Lehman Brothers, and 7 years before that was 2001, and the World Trade Center inside job and the Pentagon and all the ensuing problems politically from the Patriot Act and what I call the Fascist Manifesto or Nazi Manifesto. And then my colleague said, well, keep going back. I said, okay, 1994. And I got it wrong. I said, isn't that the irrational exuberance from Greenspan that led to the Asian meltdown? And they said, no, the Asian meltdown was 97, 98. 94 might have had an irrational exuberance with Greenspan, namely, he printed too much money, and that's a whole story in itself, where they no longer were going to follow the economy and how much money they printed. They're going to follow the consumer price doctored index, so they printed too much money. No, 94 was the Mexican peso tequila crisis. All right, go back 7 years. What happened in 87? Black Monday. What happened in 1980? The Hunt brothers. Gold and silver peaked. What happened in 73? The Arab oil embargo. Well, let's just stop there because I struggle to find what happened in 1966. Gosh, I don't know. LBJ decided not to run for re-election. I don't know. Climax of the Vietnam War. I don't know. Agent Orange controversy. So let's just start at 73, 80, 87, 94, 01, 08. So we're due for a crisis in 2015, and I say it has already begun. Now, being a probability guru, shall I say, my colleagues put forth the question. This has got to be a rare event, Jim, that all these crisis events happen 7 years apart.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, we have 7. So let's just say 49 years, and let's say these are, we like to think in probability terms of urns, like a big basket, and balls. If I'm going to toss 7 balls, namely the crises,
Okay.
into the 49 urns, namely the years, what's the probability that I got one in 7 different year urns and they're all 7 apart?
Very low, I might guess.
Okay, I like to flip, when it's a rare event, I like to flip it and say, well, it's 1 in how many? What do you think? More than a million?
Well, if I guess, it's cheating because I know.
I told you, didn't I?
I saw your math, yeah.
It's 61.8 billion.
To 1.
To 1.
Right.
So, do you think these 7-year cycles are accidental?
Based on those odds, I wouldn't bet on 1 in however many billion you said. No.
Well, it leads one to believe that there should be some planning for the year of 2022. Okay, let me back up here on this cycle. When I was in not graduate school, I had my own learning experience in the late 80s and 90s with the Wall Street Journal and Barron's and New York Times business section, but that's very much corporate related. There's a lot of trends analysis in Barron's and in Wall Street Journal, and there's, to be sure, some in the New York Times, but those were my 3 textbooks, if you will. I mean, I would get out there on a Saturday afternoon and I'd read for 4 hours. Barron's. I'd read 5 or 6 articles, including William Pisek. He was one of my favorites. I would read interviews about, Black or Zulauf or Bill Gross or some of these guys. I'd read their interviews. So I learned. So it was just a lot of fun learning back then, Will, but we're in a tough time now. And you cannot say that this cycle is merely the credit cycle. Because that's what I learned back then. That you build up too much debt, and after about 4 or 5 years, you develop some problems, and by year 6, you get some crisis, and by year 7, you treat it. Well, what we're getting is not so much like a sine wave of going up and going down, and going up and down. No, what we're getting is what they call a damped sine wave, where it's not reducing, it's increasing in the amplitude. Each crisis is bigger. Can you safely say that the 2001, by the way, 2001 and World Trade Center 9/11, that's also the aftermath of the 2000 tech telecom bust.
Right.
They do have matching years in a bang-bang kind of event, which means that what I should do for the probability is not have them 7 apart, but have them 6 or 7 apart. And I'm going to work on that probability, and I believe the answer is probably going to be something on the order of 10 billion. But, we now can say the Lehman Brothers event was a lot bigger in damage from 2001. The 2001 event was a lot bigger than 1994. I tend to think the damage from 1987 was pretty much on par with that of 1994. And this whole thing got kicked off in 73 when very few of the sheep understand that the oil embargo was suggested, not by the Arabs, by force. It was suggested by Henry Kissinger. He said, look, double, triple the oil price. The oil companies will have these windfall profits, and we'll surely have to worry about, taxes from the government and all these things with the Congress. That's the windfall profits tax. But you Arab nations, and you Iran, you will have an opportunity for lots and lots and lots of money in your coffers, money to your royal families, and money for budgets to buy American weapons. The Arab oil embargo was authored by the Rockefeller family. Henry Kissinger was their agent.
Wow.
So these crises are getting worse. And I believe 2015 here is going to be an order of magnitude worse than Lehman Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Lehman Brothers had, let's be honest here. If they hadn't tinkered, we would have seen Goldman Sachs die.
Yeah.
Instead, they killed Lehman Brothers by cutting off all their trade settlements in bonds. They said, no, we're going to deny them. We're going to choke them of their liquidity and force them to die. And when they die, we're going to take AIG and nationalize it and then direct 100 cents on the dollar for all the Goldman Sachs failed derivatives.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a Goldman Sachs death event, but they were in control of the U.S. government Treasury Department. Now, what I'm saying is 2015, I've been saying this now for a little while, and I put it in a little clearer terms. It'll be the year that the dollar faces its death, and the petrodollar goes away, and nations of the world scream for something to replace the dollar as the standard. And the standard will be gold and the RMB currency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to happen in steps, maybe simultaneous, but the BRICS nations will. I've been informed they're going to come out with these gold trade notes. They're going to be serving as letters of credit. I've been saying this on almost every one of the radio shows. Gold-backed letters of credit. They're not going to be posting treasury bills. They're going to be posting gold-backed trade notes. And I think eventually you're going to see RMB, the Chinese currency, being used. Now, just take a look at all the different countries. I don't want to name them all, but there are about 25 major nations, like Australia, France, Germany, New Zealand, Canada, that are all working with China, bilateral trade, to settle in RMB. Okay, you've got a nucleus there of non-dollar trade settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Get these BRICS, and there are 140 nations, or is it 117? I don't know exactly. Over 100 BRICS alliance nations. They have said, they have signed, it's like a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding. I don't know the exact formal terms, but they're all saying the same thing. We're going to trade and we're going to settle in something besides the dollar. So let's produce something.
Man, that kind of talk would get you would get you nuked not too long ago. Am I
Now
wrong?
what it's doing is creating. Now what it's doing is creating what I call the critical mass.
You're exactly, and it's palpable. I mean, it's becoming obvious.
Yeah, it's becoming obvious, and it's becoming very clear that the dollar is not going to rule the roost.
Right. Well, the fact, I mean, and just that, the fact that this this move is not being met with as fierce resistance by the U.S. as, let's say, Gaddafi trying to introduce a gold-backed dinar, or Saddam trying to trade oil for euro or whatever the currency outside of the dollar was. Again, saying that it's obvious. In this case, it seems obvious. The rest of the world is calling the bluff.
Well, the American citizens don't see
Right.
that the rest of the world is abandoning the dollar and trade.
That is one thing that blows me away, Jim, is when I plugged into a Russian website, and of course have it all translated and such, but you can monitor fairly distributed news networks in other countries, and they're talking about this stuff. People are, I mean, I would like to argue that the masses of people in other countries are way more aware of what the hell's going on than the masses of American folks.
Well, the masses of American folks are getting distracted by Ferguson, Missouri.
Hey, did you see that Super Bowl last night, too?
My Patriots won, and I just got to say that the Boob of the Year award goes to Coach Pete Carroll for not running Marshawn Lynch 4 straight times in rapid no-huddle offense to win the game.
I know. That was an insane play.
Well, I heard why. Pete Carroll tried to justify it and said, well, we didn't have any timeouts, or we had one timeout left, so we thought we'd do a pass. No, you don't get conservative. You win the game.
Yeah.
I think the Patriot defense was on the lookout for a quick short pass, and they just dialed up in their logs in their head from watching the tapes. Well, what are their favorite plays? Their favorite play, a cross pattern over the middle, tight end wide out, whatever. Oh my gosh, I screamed. I lived in Boston for 20 years. I attended about 18 or so games, home games at New England Patriots, and one in the new stadium. So I've got a lot of loyalties to the old Terry Bradshaw years when I was in grad school and grew up in Pittsburgh. But, I like to say I've got emotional loyalties to both Pittsburgh Steelers and New England Patriots. And
I'll say I was happy to see the interception as well, just because I won the bracket at the Super Bowl party.
Well, I can tell you who cried, and it was the bookies, because I've got a friend who has some very unusual statistics.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of the money was bet on the favorite New England?
Interesting. And it was a large majority, was it?
71.
Wow.
So the bookies took a beating.
Oh.
Now I'm asking the question, if we're living in a truly diversified, corrupt United States, will Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson have a car accident?
Jeez. Well, what did I tell you the other day in an email, Jim? We were talking, and I said, when is a Rothschild or a Diamond going to get picked off by some sniper? I mean, that's when we'll know the tides are turning. When do one of these people just start disappearing or getting picked off, or instead of really unknown bankers to us falling off buildings? When does some former Marine with sniper skills just take out Jamie Dimon while he's walking down the street?
Well, why would a Marine do it? Because his paycheck comes from the cabal.
Well, true. Okay, so a former.
That's the big question. Honestly, Will, that is the question.
Yeah.
Who would do it? It wouldn't be the security agency and their hitmen on the small country in the southeast corner of the Mediterranean, because they're part of it. They're part of it. They're the ones who were part of my threat, a death threat, on 2 different occasions in 2006. Mm-hmm. So who would do it? I'll tell you who will do it. The Chinese triad.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But let me just say something of a very weird variety. There is an underwater San Diego military facility. It's considered part of their DUMB network of the deep underground military bases.
Mm-hmm.
These are underground military cities in the United States. I don't want to get into a long discussion, but you can do a Google search on it. I had in the January report a network of it. There's a heavy concentration in Mexico and Arizona. There's a surprising lack of concentration, but there are nodes in Denver, which is called CIA West. So these are all linked with underground, high-speed, we're talking 200-mile-an-hour trains.
And this is all Langley logistics?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
the supposed earthquake, it took place in September, I think it was, in 2011.
Yep.
That was not an earthquake.
Construction?
That was a collapse, a sabotage of one of their underground cities, and it's believed to be a sister city to Langley. So there's a lot going on. I heard it was called a sabotage.
Do we know who was on the other end of the sabotage?
My guess is the people who dislike the narcos and the banker cabal.
Yeah, so that was a modern-day Diamond getting picked off.
No, I mean, I'm painting a picture. I don't know the identity, but it had to be an enemy of the narco cabal and the banker, the narco barons and the banker cabal. And I'm thinking it's the old, ancient Chinese white dragon type family. So I don't know. I'm just guessing. Well, who else is opposing them?
Yeah. These aren't the types that have somebody on a rooftop to snipe somebody. They have much more clever ways of doing it now in this advanced world that we're in today.
Well, my point for bringing up the San Diego underwater facility is that I'm told that there are some underwater prisons, and they're filling up.
No kidding.
I was told back in 2012 that there's a small network of underwater prisons in the Caribbean.
Huh.
And I have captured some photographs of underwater facilities, and whether they are prisons, I don't know.
Huh.
So what I am told is they are arresting mid-level bankers who know a lot and who are guilty of collusion and, carrying out actions. And they're imprisoning them until they flip.
Huh.
And they cannot leave the prison until they start cooperating with the Interpol and, I believe, well, I call it the new sheriff in town from the east, but I think it's pretty clear now that it's the White Dragons.
Very interesting.
The White Dragons are of good in the same way that the banker cabal is of evil.
Right.
And the evil is your genetically modified foods, your chemtrails, your fracking contamination of the water system, your fabricated viruses, your laced vaccines, your bond fraud. Those are products of the evil side. And the product of the good side is going to be some kind of debt relief and provision of honest money.
New energy, maybe?
And I'm hearing they don't own the cold fusion.
Right.
Cold fusion's been around for a while. Now we're seeing demos of it. So what we're going to see is not a release by its owners, but it's going to be a sponsorship
Interesting.
by the East, and Russia's already done demos with lots of scientists in attendance who can say, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
This is producing from a, say, cubic centimeter of water. It is producing energy at 10,000 times as much as a cubic centimeter of gasoline.
Wow.
10,000. So notice that just in the last couple of weeks, Toyota announced their fuel cell car. They're giving away all the patents. We've got a movement now in energy, and there's some rumors out there that might be based in fact that part of the oil price decline, I've been arguing that it's from the fractured derivatives, the Forex derivatives tying major currencies to oil.
Right.
And they're fractured, so the oil price is going down, the dollar's going up from redemption and settlement of the derivative contract, which are all in dollars. But there might be a second component that the smart money is starting to invest in fuel cell and cold fusion.
Interesting.
And abandoning some of their oil investments, like even deposits. So I'm hearing some strange things, and when I say strange, I don't mean kooky. I mean unusual things, like Russia might have cut some deals where they're going to be a lead sponsor of new energy methods, even though they're the #1 producer of oil and gas.
Very interesting.
So I don't know where this is all going, but there's a lot of good coming down the road. There's a lot of reason to be hopeful.
Yeah.
But it's like watching a tornado movie. You've got some placid times on the other side of the tornado. But, your barn's probably going to get blown away.
Right. You're going to lose a couple cows,
A couple cows floating off in the vortex. But are you going to lose your home, too? Is your roof going to go off? How many rooms in your home are going to be gone?
Right.
I don't have answers to this.
Will you still even have the shirt on your back?
Yeah, here's something to put it in terms that you can, sit down and understand. The U.S. government decided to dishonor the global reset for currencies, the return to the gold standard. They were going to do it step by step in a peaceful, smooth transition way. It was going to be devastating for Western banks. So they offered the Ukraine war and bought some time. They've bought now close to a year. I think that all started in February of last year. Here we are, February early, so not quite exactly a year. Because the U.S. is resisting, the damage is going to be done at a greater level. Because it's not going to be done in a constructive step-by-step transition. It's going to be done in a way that quarantines the United States, isolates it as a pariah rogue nation, and might collapse the entire U.S. economy just to isolate and terminate those who are running the country. Mm-hmm. They're sitting on enormous funds that are not being properly distributed, that my understanding has to do with 80-year-old treasury bonds that China's holding. They're called legacy bonds. It's very difficult to get accurate information. There's some false interpretation. I don't have the answers to this. I've seen some of the bonds. I've heard stories about them. I've read some very recent analysis about them. And the U.S. government is actually saying, oh, they're so old, they don't matter anymore.
Jim, what were the bonds that were found like 2-3 years ago? Oh, trillions or something in these old bonds found in a vault somewhere. Do you remember that?
I don't follow this, honestly, Will. I'm just too busy. If I had a staff of 4 that I could direct their time, I would look this up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm waiting for things to be revealed.
Yeah.
Because I'm so busy with the death of the petrodollar, the fracturing of EU, the Ukraine, the pipeline, the Saudi transition, the RMB facilities around the world. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm just extremely busy.
It's unbelievable. I mean, there's so much to digest. I mean, look at the 10 topics we just covered from the last 3 weeks. Anyway, it's not to beat a dead horse. I know that you have some exciting plans coming up this morning, or this late morning, this early afternoon. So I don't want to keep you, my good sir. You've been, as always, awesome with your time and content. Do you have anything else you want to throw out there before we call it a day?
Not really. People need to, just the standard advice, Will. Mm-hmm. People who think that they've got a lot of money put aside for the other side of this storm in their stocks and bank CDs and pensions, you're dreaming.
Well, I think, Jim, the folks that are listening to or reading or even coming across your content, even if they view a storm as coming, if you can at least acknowledge that a storm is coming, I don't think you're or even could think you're going to be safe in stocks and bonds. I mean, when you do the slightest bit of
I disagree with you. I think that they're going to say, well, I made it through 87, I made it through 2001, I made it through 2008, and they haven't noticed that they're 7 years apart. They're figuring, well, I might take a little hit. That, as my brother says, the United States always pulls through.
You know, you're right, Jim.
It's not going to pull through. We're going to have a different dollar. We're going to have a different dollar. We're going to lose the dollar as it's known, the Federal Reserve note, as it's known, tied to the treasuries that are sitting in global banking reserve system. We're going to lose that.
So the dollars, I had a client that wanted me to ask you this some time ago. For a friend of mine who has, I don't know, $10,000 or $20,000 in our current U.S. dollar format in cash in their mattress, what happens to that? Does that becomes Scheisse dollar in this case, does it not?
I think that money in the banking system is going to have some kind of an automatic forced conversion. What I'm hearing, it's very difficult to say, well, I called Jacob Lew and he told me it's right. Or I called Jamie Dimon and when he wasn't busy doing bond fraud, he answered my question. No, what I'm hearing, and this is a year or so old, that dollars sitting in foreign bank accounts like Panama, Hong Kong, Dubai, Singapore, Switzerland, dollars outside the United States are going to be given a real good transition exchange.
Okay.
And dollars inside the United States are going to take probably a 30% whack for movement into the new Scheisse dollar. They're calling it Republic dollar. there's the Federal Reserve note, but now I'm hearing of the Treasury note. The Treasury note might be the new dollar for its official name. I like calling it the Republic dollar or the Scheist dollar.
Yeah.
They're going to go to a different dollar. It's not going to be filling up Korean banking system. Mm-hmm. It's going to be for the U.S. to pay out for imports.
Right.
And they're the exporting nations like India and Japan and whatever, Brazil, they're going to say, we don't want your treasury dollars and we don't want your I got that wrong. We don't want your treasury bills. We don't want your treasury bonds. We don't want your old dollars anymore. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to be told, well, we have this new thing called the Republic dollar. And they're going to say, all right, but you got to discount it because you've got a shit fundamentals.
So it's just a massive devaluation then to this shit dollar, Scheist dollar, excuse me.
If it has to stand on its own, what's its annual deficit? $1 trillion.
Yeah.
What's its total debt that has to be reworked, reconstructed, renegotiated, whatever? $18 trillion. Mm-hmm. What's its import-export balance? Well, we got a negative 400-something billion a year. It's 35, 40 billion a month. Well, what do you do to restore balance? And here's where it's going to get really ugly for Americans, Will. Seriously. Because they're not studying Venezuela like I am. Mm-hmm. You have a new currency that's struggling for balance. You invite foreigners to invest in your country to bring about a balance, like say from foreign direct investment. So your investment works toward the current account balance. The investments start to come in. You have your trade deficit. You have your investment surplus. You try to seek balance. The Chinese buy businesses across the United States, including farms, and 1/3 of all the output is sent outside the country to gain for, what do they call it? Hard currency for exports, mm-hmm. to slow down the deficits. So foreigners will come in, invest their foreign money. It comes into the U.S. Out goes a portion of our output to try to relieve the deficits and bring about an equilibrium. And the new shit dollar, I much prefer shit dollar because Scheist dollar makes it sound like it's some kind of an hors d'oeuvre.
We'll keep the first hour of the program is family friendly. I'll put a little one.
The Republic dollar is going to require devaluations until, a sequence, like 5 or 4 or 6.
Right.
Until balance is found in the current account deficit, which will have another factor in the government deficit. If we need to attract foreign buyers for our government debt, we need to discount our currency. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing is that the goal for this currency reset that the U.S. has been resisting is for a total of 80% devaluation.
Wow.
Now that's what's coming and not being told to the sheep.
Yeah.
Now you do an 80% devaluation, you look at the 80 versus the 20, and you get a 400% increase in everything being imported.
Yeah.
I used a different way of doing it. I used to say an 80% devaluation is 20 on 100, so 100 over 20 is 5, and subtract your base. Well, it's easier just to take the 80 versus the 20,
right? And
you get a 4 to 1. 400% increase, say, for
food.
Say food from Chile.
Okay, fair enough. So California oranges might still be the same price, but
they're going to be subject to different pressures. Like, what do they import in their production process?
Right.
Do they import some diesel fuel?
Certainly.
I don't know.
Fertilizers. Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, potash from Canada. How will Canada fare? I don't know. I don't know how Canada's going to fare, but I do know that out of the gate, we're likely to see a 25 or 30% devaluation for the Republic dollar, the Scheist dollar, the shit dollar. And that will mean suddenly that Americans are going to feel poorer, and very difficult questions about what is their debt structure, their debt portfolio. Is their home loan going to be remaining in the old dollars?
Right, right.
So will they see a, oh gosh, if it's 30%, that'd be 70 over 30,
That's
7/3,
double.
which is a double or more. Are they going to see their, oh man,
essentially their ability to continue to pay their debt, whether it's a car loan or a mortgage, the ability to just keep up with that payment, you're going to lose more than half of your purchasing power or your buying power to pay.
Which brings up the next question. Who would seize the properties, the assets that have debts attached to them?
Right.
And there you go again. It's the bankers. So will the currency reset, when it finally happens, not only wreck the U.S. banks, but give the bankers an opportunity to go grab assets across the country from debt defaults?
Sure, yeah.
So, this is not going to end well.
How many houses does BlackRock have in its portfolio? Jesus.
I think they own a significant portion of Phoenix.
Yeah, and among other cities, right? Wow.
All right, well, that's a good point to wrap up on, Will.
Well, sir, it's always a pleasure. Great stuff. I'm gonna just writing up the content for this is gonna be exciting. Thanks again for coming on. Again, it's Jim Willie, everybody, the Golden Jackass hat trick letter editor himself. We'll have links to his site where you can find the hat trick letter, and you can subscribe to Jim's monthly. How often do you release the letter, Jim?
I just made a change. There's one report. It's good size. That's my way of saying it.
It is. No, it's a good
pretty
one.
long. There's one good sized, hefty document per month.
Okay.
It's called the Global Money War Report. I'm focusing primarily on the death of the dollar, the return of the gold standard, and all the different factors that are coming into play. The petrodollar, the Eurasian trade zone, the gold trade notes, the BRICS, the resistance, the actions by the Swiss, the actions related to Greece and Turkey recently. I'm focusing on all the major events, and in no way can I cover all the different things that are going on because of the quickening of events. I'm focusing on the main critical events and how they're tied together, and how gold is going to come back and be reinstated globally as a standard. It's going to come back as a standard, Will, through the trade corridors and not the Forex currency corridors. Because we're blocking the Forex side, and therefore the whole world is going to boycott the dollar with trade and render the Treasury bond as junk.
Well, the tides are turning. It certainly is evident for those of us that are paying attention. If you guys like Jim's interviews and you like his content, you're sure to really love his hat trick letter. It's what was the last month was almost, I don't know, 20 pages. I mean, it's a good morning read. It'll take you 2 or 3, 4 cups of coffee. So thanks for all that you do, Jim. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, thanks for having me on, Will.
Take care. Enjoy your afternoon, my friend.
Okay.
Yeah.